I'm Brittney Gallagher, and I'm joined by...
Hey, I'm Phil Libben.
And we're also joined by Rebekah Maggor, who is the artistic director at mmhmm. And before joining mmhmm, she was a professor of theater and communication at Cornell University and was the founding director of the program in speaking and learning at the Center for Teaching at Harvard University. And she's been working in higher education for almost 2 decades. So Rebekah is highly qualified to guest host this episode to talk about teaching and distributed higher education. So Rebekah, I'll let you take it from here.
In your previous episodes, you've been focusing on the business world. And today, we're going to focus on education and in particular, higher education. How is the out-of-office movement transforming teaching and learning at universities and colleges? And is there a parallel out-of-classroom movement for students and professors? So Phil, you're a CEO and technologist, and yet you decided that it was important for you to take some time out to teach this past semester. So could you tell us a little bit about the course that you taught and what inspired you to get into the university classroom at this particular moment?
Well, they asked me to, and that was all it took, it turns out. I was fortunate to co-teach a class at the Walton Business School at the University of Arkansas about distributed work. The distributed work is really changing the world, and there's a lot of things that we just don't know about it. There's a lot of important questions, not only don't we know the answers to all of them, I don't think we actually know what all of the questions are yet, because this is so new as a mainstream movement. So I thought it would be a good idea to get some really smart students together and together try to figure out, well, what are the questions? What should we be asking about how life and work will be like in this distributed world? And then, the project of actually answering those questions feels like it's going to take a few decades.
You actually taught this course as a distributed course, intentionally communicating with students in different ways. Can you tell us a little bit about that model?
Yeah, we taught the class using the communication pyramid. There's 3 layers. There's live and in person on top, there's live video kind of in the middle, and then there's recorded video at the base. And the philosophy is you should use each section for what it's best at. We're not thinking about video as a substitute for, well, you'd rather be in person, but you can't, so you're going to do it on a video. We're thinking about it as like, well, what's better on live video than in person? What's better on recorded video than in person or live video, and so on. Just like put everything where it's ideal. And the idea is that whenever you're explaining anything, moderately complex or more complex, it's better on recorded video because you can use visuals, you can have multiple takes, you can get it right. So it's a higher quality explanation from the point of view of the presenter. And of course, it's infinitely better from the point of view of the students, of the audience, because they don't all have to pay attention at the same time. They can watch it when they can devote the mental energy to it. They don't all have to watch it at the same speed. You might watch it at 1.5x, somebody else might watch it at 1.7x, whatever. They can watch it as many times as they want. They don't have to worry about taking notes because they won't miss anything. We can always rewind. They can watch it multiple times. So the idea is anything that's a lecture, anything that's a presentation of information ought to be done recorded. So we did that every week. We set up a TV channel, posted all the lectures, all of the materials, all the students' work they had to post as videos. And then once a week, we got together for, I think, 90 minutes in this middle layer in live video, and that was just talking. There was no lecturing. There was no presentation of new information. Everyone had already seen it, so it was just a back and forth Q&A. So it was actually, I think, it was what live video is great at, which is talking about something while looking at it. We can put up slides. We can remind people of what they had seen. We can talk about it, and then. I think 3 or 4 times during the semester we got together live in person, but that was just for dinner. That was just for doing something that was best in person, which is to bond, to build relationships. So we kind of taught the class using this methodology as an experiment, and I felt like it worked pretty well.
After having taught this course, what are the things that you believe are excellent discoveries and should remain part of the way that we teach and learn in higher education? And what are the parts that you think need to change?
Well, I learned a lot co-teaching this class, but I learned even more right after because I took a class. Right now I'm doing a 4-week program at Stanford University at the business school there, aimed at startups. And it's a great program, but it's taught in this very conventional way where basically there's like 70 of us sitting in a classroom. And it's kind of fascinating being back in that environment because in some ways, it's great. There's some of the sessions have been fantastic. Other sessions are just awful because you're basically sitting there in a barely interactive session in person, listening to someone talk way too slowly without any ability to like fast forward them. And it's been fascinating to watch like what works really well in person, because some of the stuff works really well. Like they did a few kind of more interactive exercises where we're doing stuff, where their hands and people are moving around. And they did a few things that were just traditional lectures. And the traditional lectures, they're just better on video. It would have been much better for us to have seen the video ahead of time. And then when we got together in person with the instructors, that should have just been a back and forth with everyone actually already having seen and understood the content. And so it kind of made me think about like, well, what's best in each area? And I kind of realized that like, wow, I'm really glad to be here in person with a bunch of really brilliant people. And I'm learning a lot. But even in this in-person program, they should have been doing a bunch of it on video and a bunch of it on recorded video. And it would have made the in-person times even more special.
In this episode on higher education, we are joined by guests who are both teachers and learners. To begin, we have two of the students, Jose Torres and Lily Racasi, who are in the course, Important Questions in Distributed Work, at the Walton College of Business at the University of Arkansas.
And Dean Matt Waller, who's the dean of the business school, who co-taught the class with me and really was the mastermind behind most of this activity. And Professor Enrique Dans from the IE Business School in Madrid. Enrique is someone who's been thinking and writing about distributed education for a few years and has been a power user of mmhmm since the very beginning. So I was very grateful to Enrique that he joined us to impart some of his wisdom to the students.
Online teaching has conventionally been viewed as second best, an anemic attempt to replicate the in-person experience. But as Phil has just said, all of this is changing. The sharp divisions between in-person and online are blurring. We're seeing a burst of innovation that is setting the groundwork for the hybrid campus. Teachers and learners alike are increasingly viewing the use of digital technology in education as a way to support flexibility for all students, whether on campus or distance learners. Educators are using their newly acquired technological skills to devise intentionally distributed or blending learning programs. Online is becoming integral to how we do things. But as we assimilate it into our day-to-day practice, recent research into online learning reminds us that effective digital teaching does not erode the important role of teachers. The educators leading this transformation are not using technology to relinquish teaching to scalable software, but rather to interact with students, build communities of learners, cultivate a sense of belonging, and communicate more clearly and engagingly. Importantly, digital tools are not only for teachers, but also for students. Distributed courses lend themselves to digital assignments that go beyond the traditional written forms like essays or written exams, and incorporate much more diverse media such as collaborative video projects. So what do students think about these changes? And do they think that incorporating technology into their work is a good thing? How was your experience in this fully distributed class as compared to your experience with ERT, emergency remote teaching?
I chose this fully distributed environment. Whereas when COVID happened, I didn't choose to be online. I didn't choose the remote setting. And so my attitude going into a remote classroom wasn't the best. And it's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy where you don't expect it to be a good class. So it really doesn't end up being a good class. Basically all of my classes were lecture-based. And I was just getting really bored, pulling my laptop up and just sitting there staring at my screen while my teacher's talking when I can do a million other things with my time during that period. And so I hated it, just having to sit there and just so that I'm counted present.
It was very difficult for the professors, at least my professors, to sort of transition into that remote teaching because, well, they had no clue with it. They had no experience with it. And it was also very difficult for the students too, because there was just it was disengaging for both parties, for both the professors and the students. And I think that's really what made it so difficult with that sort of emergency style. But I mean, we didn't have a choice. So, but I think with our class, we came prepared. We knew ahead of time what we were going to be teaching and how we could utilize the technology at our disposal And I think as a result, it definitely made the experience a lot more worthwhile.
You were asked to create videos, and you did have to put in, you know, you had to cite peer-reviewed articles, and you had to cite a certain number of, journal articles and newspaper articles. So it wasn't like you didn't have to do the same amount of research, but you then made videos as opposed to writing a paper. So do you think that there's any benefit to integrating new technology into student assignments?
I definitely think it does. There's that part. I actually feel like I'm so much more creative than writing, paper, because you are having to tap into that creative side of you of how can I make this entertaining? How can I make this entertaining that's funny to me and I think may be funny to everyone else? It kind of brings out personality out of you that you can't really bring it out on a piece of paper.
But does that kind of creativity and that kind of entertainment value, does it really help you learn the material in a more profound way? Are you coming away with a better understanding or a more critical understanding of the stuff we were trying to teach you in the course?
Yes. So the other thing is you're having to talk about the research that you've done in the video. Whereas on paper, you could just type it and maybe copy and paste and rephrase it. I also had to think about how I was going to put it in a way that made sense to the audience. So I learned so much more by having to restructure the information I learned and present it than if I were just to pull in information, put it on a piece of paper.
Can you imagine a future where we are using these models of distributed education to the benefit of teaching and learning in higher education?
I personally don't like that idea. I think there's a lot of value in in-person interaction, especially when it comes to classes that value conversations and discussions and critical thinking where students and professors have to interact with each other. There's that, I think, brain wavelength or nonverbal communication happening behind the scene that cannot be projected through the screen. But with classes where it's all information, where the professor just lectures the entire time, I think it should definitely be remote. It's pointless to sit in a classroom if you're not interacting with anyone in your classroom. So I definitely think that it saves time. But in my vision, I don't see it being completely distributed. Some classes would be purely remote, some classes would be hybrid, and some classes would be in person based on how it best benefits the class or brings the most value out of the class that is being taught.
To tell you a story about gray dark cubicles, an event that changes the world, and a bright future of happiness and freedom.
COVID has really threw a wrench into the global workforce.
Distributed work has completely shifted the workforce we used to know.
So, what can we do to fix this?
Hello, everyone.
Hi, my name's Olivia.
My name is Andres.
My name is Liv.
Today, many companies are distributed.
This desire to work remotely has affected all facets of the job market.
Companies have to pivot their talent acquisition and retention strategies.
That flexibility is key. Not that flexibility.
In-person, synchronous, and asynchronous communication.
Because we're asynchronous and because we do have multiple forms of communication, it just makes you a better communicator.
Building trust, having open communication, and creating an inclusive culture.
It really is possible to feel a sense of belonging in a distributed work environment.
By utilizing technological tools such as mmhmm and Slack.
It's the ultimate flexible workspace at our company. There is no workspace, you kind of create your own.
Thank you so much for watching.
Bye.
And now we'll hear from Enrique Dans in conversation with Phil Libin and Dean Matthew Waller. Dans argues that the teachers of the future will be professor-producers. They will augment teaching and learning with video and incorporate digital media into their pedagogy. But there are, Dans warns us, barriers to this kind of change. We need our technology to be easy to use and playful, offering tangible improvement over existing practices for both teachers and students. We need resources to facilitate the transition to faculty-led integration of digital tools in teaching. We need accrediting bodies and assessment rubrics to reward rather than discourage pedagogical innovation.
So you talked about in the long term this professor as a producer concept. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I think that's really interesting, right? It's this idea that you can make the new reality better than the old reality, but you have to do something. Like you as a professional have to change the way you think about it. You can't expect the new reality to accommodate all of your old habits.
The whole experience of online teaching online education didn't work. We didn't do it right. Okay? We failed miserably. Why? Because in most of the cases, professors resorted to tools that caused, that triggered, death by PowerPoint. And death by PowerPoint, the problem is that all of a sudden what you were seeing was a lot of slides passing by and the professor trying to teach sharing screen and teaching like this. Hey, I'm here, hello. So what if I start thinking about my role in a different way? What if instead of preparing a class, I start producing a class? Think about the professor as a producer. So this is powerful because during the pandemic, I was forced to reinvent myself. I didn't want to be boring and trigger this death by PowerPoint in my students. I wanted to do things a little bit better. And I came up with very interesting tools. Like, for instance, all of a sudden, I had very easy and very attractive tools. Okay, so using or using this type of tools allowed me to produce my classes in a much more ambitious way. All of a sudden, I started to rethink, for instance, guest speakers. I use guest speakers in my courses. Normally, I get 1 or 2 guest speakers in a 20 sessions or 50 sessions course, and I am restricted to guest speakers that are in Madrid. Unfortunately, I don't have a budget to fly them in from other places, so I have to rely on people who are in Madrid, or either traveling and they drop by Madrid, or they live there, etc. They work there. During the pandemic, I could do whatever I wanted.
So whatever skills that you as a professor had before, now you're also a producer. So what does that mean to you, and how has it changed your work?
The thing is, you have to provide professors with this opportunity to become producers, but in a nice way, in a way that, of course, you can teach professors to do things. But first of all, it's interesting. Universities are very good at teaching others, but they suck big time when it comes to teaching themselves. I mean, if I try to offer internal courses to create these skills, many professors say, I'm busy, I'm too busy. So what we see here is that this problem of isomorphism. Isomorphism is, the problem that all of us or our institutions, we tend to resemble our normative environment. So if I drop you from an airplane in a parachute and you land at a university, you probably do like this. You look right, left, and you say, I'm at a university. I'm pretty sure I am in a university. They all look pretty much the same. And every now and then you find an institution that does something different and they start to break that isomorphism, which is difficult to do because when you break the isomorphism, what could happen? You could, for instance, fall down in the rankings. And that's terrible because the rankings are, wow, like a religion right now. So if you start doing things in a different way, who knows how the market could perceive that? I mean, some of the elements of this isomorphism are really hard to break. But in the end, by becoming isomorphic, we all feel a little bit like we are, that they wind you up in the morning and you go like this. And this affects not only professors, it affects the students too. So how do you manage to take that isomorphism and put it in some sort of reward sign and say, hey, break it, do something different. You need to take these professors who are not wired to learn more things, they are wired to teach, and you need to give them the opportunity to learn new tricks or new things in a way that they feel not just that they know how to use the tools, no, they need to feel extremely confident with those tools. So otherwise they don't use them.
It's a really interesting point. And specifically your point about ratings, about being afraid that you drop in ratings, I think I never thought of it like that, but that's really interesting because like the agencies that rate things are by definition the established people and agencies under the old system. Like that's what ratings are. Ratings are always going to be fundamentally conservative because like the people who put themselves in a position to give ratings are the people who have claimed to be experts in the old way of doing things. So it's like anytime you have that, it's going to be a conservative force that's going to hold back change. It's kind of fascinating.
And across time, it becomes the perversion of the metric. we came to agree, for whatever reason, that the best metric to evaluate a business school, for instance, was to measure the progression in salary in 2 years after graduation. Why? I mean, shouldn't we ask ourselves, is that the best metric? For sure. Because if you are strongly focused on entrepreneurship, the students who graduate and become entrepreneurs, that metric is a little bit less significant. Or perhaps a good metric would be, how happy are you? I don't want to be idealistic here, but are you able to get happy when you graduate after 2 years? Do you think it was a great decision or a bad decision? Are you happier than before? Do you have more degrees of freedom? Can you do more things? Or do we reduce everything to, money?
Well, that's a great point. Even if they just adjusted for cost of living, right? The rankings would switch dramatically. And again, the powers that be don't want to do that because they want to keep everything the same. And going a step further, doing what you're talking about, Professor Dans, is really radical, right? I mean, they would say, well, we can't rank things, and so we would be out of business.
This is interesting. This is like this atavistic dependency on ranking system is something that I think like anyone who's interested in embracing change has to confront.
The problem here is that we are talking about disruption. And when you talk about disruption, in most of the cases, the institutions who were the best ones, or all the Ivy Leagues, etc., before the disruption, when the disruption comes, they are not the same. There's usually a lot of change, and that's kind of difficult to it has a difficult sell. Imagine all of a sudden the criteria changing.
You've talked a great deal in this series about redistribution of opportunity. What role do you think distributed education might play in redistributing opportunity in our society?
Well, I think we have a real strong chance of making education just better for everyone, higher quality and more accessible, literally by making it easier to get to where the education is, by making it more affordable, but probably most importantly, just by increasing the quality of it, by doing certain things in asynchronous recorded video, doing other things on live video, and then getting together in person for when it really matters, like, I don't know, watching a sports ball, I guess. It could just be a better experience.
Thank you so much to our guests, Professors Enrique Dans and Matt Waller, and also to Jose Torres and Lily Ricassi, our students.
And that's it for this episode of Degrees of Freedom, Making the Out-of-Office World. Until next time, I'm Brittney Gallagher.
I'm Phil Libin.
I'm Rebekah Maggor.
Thanks for guest hosting, Rebekah. We really appreciated it. Bye.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.